Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this special episode, and don't forget to support our Patreon. Just $1 or more will get you early access to all of our content as well as other special features. Enjoy the show! The following is a fan-based video review under fair use. The Mummy is owned by Universal Pictures, Alpha Films, and Steven Summers. Please support the official release.
We gotta bring in the classic Universal Studios monsters!
Yeah, well, going to their world is one thing, bring them to our world is another.
Hey, I brought Android 18, Timon and Pumbaa, and several others here, so what's the big deal?
The big deal is monsters are on the evil side of things, and the doc said not to open those can of worms again, for fuck's sake!
And Dr. Terrawat put in an anti-evil protection wave so that specifically doesn't happen! And besides, these are the Universal monsters! They're easy to get a grip on. I mean, you could easily put Dracula to sleep and set the Frankenstein monster on fire, so if anything goes wrong, we just put them to sleep and send them back. Now get the tape into the system while I set up the final charges.
Whatever you say, Master.
Alright, get to work, Igor.
Sir, patient 92 has accessed the FTG. Power levels are at 95%.
Keep a tab on the conversation. I don't want anything to be lost.
Accessing data from World USMN 99. Fictional dimensional transporter ready to launch.
Alright, just a few more coding encryptions and... RIP! Yes! Yes!
My God. That's beautiful.
It's alive! It's alive!
Alert. Full power is breached. Overload. Okay.
You okay, buddy?
Yeah, I'm alright. How are you?
Your ass is on my leg!
Oh, so that's what broke my fall.
Get out here! God damn it. We are in serious trouble. Brad?
Yes?
Did you remember to put in the 1932 film like I asked?
I thought you meant the 1999 with Brendan Fraser.
Damn millennials! Well, looks like I gotta review this classic gem. Okay, let's just get this over with. Wait, this isn't sand? lose my shave? Hey guys, what's up? It's BigJackFilms here, and welcome to our annual Halloween special, this time simply known as Mummy Month. This is where we take a look at the Universal Mummy trilogy, as well as the recent reboot of the iconic monster. But before we jump into the first film of the trilogy, let's wind the clocks back to 1932 with the original Mummy movie.
Starring the iconic horror star Boris Karloff straight out of the success of Frankenstein, the original Mummy, released in 1932, is one of the most iconic classics of the Universal monsters. While it is an iconic monster horror movie, it's also regarded as a love story that has lasted for thousands of years, and in some respects is really true. While the Mummy doesn't spend the entire movie going around killing people like we'd expect, he still is a threatening presence, but has a smaller, still deadly goal to resurrect his princess from the dead. And while there were several in-name only sequels and gritty reboots by Hammer Studios, no one ever considered remaking the iconic 1932 film. But with the success of the many 80s remakes among other horror movies such as John Carpenter's The Thing, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Universal had considered remaking their Mummy film on a small budget, but going for a much darker tone in the 90s.
But it wasn't until director Stephen Summers stepped in to pitch his idea for the film that Universal gave him the reins with the project. What followed was actually a surprise hit at the box office back in 1999. This, of course, was Stephen Summers' adaptation of The Mummy.
So this adventurous story begins with the origins of our monster. High Priest Imhotep of ancient Egypt, played by Arnold Vosloo, is secretly having an affair with the pharaoh's mistress Anaxanamun. But when the pharaoh discovers the treachery, he's murdered by the two lovers as Anaxanamun kills herself in order for Imhotep to resurrect her in the city of Hamunaptra. But Imhotep is captured and sentenced to be buried alive for eternity. We then cut to the 1920s as we see a grand battle take place between the two forces over the city of Hamunaptra, where one of the commanders of the battle, an American adventurer Rick O'Connell, played by Brendan Fraser, battles enemy forces to defend the city. After a crushing defeat, he's captured but discovered by a British archaeologist, Evie, played by Rachel Weisz, who in turn is in search of Hamunaptra for its treasures and secrets. After setting O'Connell free, they team up with a crew of diggers and gold finders to set off for the Lost City. But along the way, they encounter many obstacles, including the descendants of the pharaoh's sacred bodyguards, simply known as the Magi, led by Adith Bey, played by Odith Ferrer. Ignoring their warnings to abandon their expedition, the crew find the city and dig up some mysterious objects, including an ancient book and a dark and disturbing coffin. But once Evie reads from the book, she accidentally awakens the mummified Imhotep, freeing him from his cursed tomb, who now seeks to destroy mankind and resurrect his beloved Anaxanamun. What follows is a series of action-packed adventures as Imhotep captures Evie, believing her to be the reincarnation of his long-lost love, and Rick O'Connell, along with Adith and Eve's brother Jonathan, played by John Hannah, must take action as, O'Connell says in the movie,
rescue the damsel in distress, kill the bad guy, and save the world.
So what are my thoughts on this remake of the classic Boris Karloff film? Well, in my humble opinion, this might actually surpass the original.
The 1932 classic is iconic, and Boris Karloff will always be the original and definitive Mummy. But, much like Kong 76, this movie takes the original horror classic and reimagines it with a fun, classy Hollywood adventure. This, in many ways, is what Peter Jackson's King Kong could and should have been. In fact, some say the scriptwriters took elements from Peter Jackson's original 1996 draft.
When I saw The Mummy, I thought, did they read the King Kong script? You know, it was almost that sort of, classic sort of Hollywood adventure feeling kind of film.
The film is still scary and keeps its horror movie tone still intact, but also is a great serialized adventure movie on par with the likes of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Plus, it's got some fun rooting characters, a familiar story that everyone can enjoy, some kick-ass action scenes all over the place, along with smart-ass humor, and the special effects aren't half bad. Yeah, we'll get back to that. But let's first off talk about the characters, cause there are some great ones here. First, of course, there's the fun and flashy Rick O'Connell. I gotta admit that for the most part, he is just being Indiana Jones. But in terms of action scenes and combat, O'Connell is a badass.
Likewise.
In fact, when Evie essentially calls him a gunfighter, that kinda sums up his character, because he is a badass gunfighter, and it's freaking awesome! For his most iconic role to date, Brendan Fraser does an awesome job with his work and put a lot of physical and comedic timing into his part. Not to mention him, along with several moments from this movie, creating some of the most iconic memes currently on the internet.
But like always, a hero can have no way of going through the journey without inspiration from the leading lady.
Which we have with Rachel Weisz as Evie, and in my opinion, she did a great job. She plays it off as a very brightened spirit, as well as having some good comedic timing.
It is time to make you mine, forever.
For all eternity, idiot.
Plus, for the most part, she grows as a character from an innocent being to a courageous personality. I'll talk about her more when we get to the sequel, because quite frankly, I thought she got a little better.
Fine.
But for now, let's talk about the other characters. Jonathan is, for the most part, the comic relief, although his motivations as a character are kind of generic. In fact, this Daffy Duck cartoon can pretty much sum him up in a nutshell.
I'm rich! I'm wealthy! Yahoo! Save me, pal! Save me! Help!
Actually, are we sure he's not challenging Scrooge McDuck? Come to think of it, this actually is kind of like a DuckTales cartoon. Ricktails! Woohoo! Other characters like Dr. Terrence Bay, the Americans, and even the pilot that kind of looks like Rip Taylor have some great moments to shine.
Americans.
But in some respects can be considered the red shirts of the movie. Even Benny, who is kind of the second villain of the piece, can be a bit of a rat.
We're gonna get yours, Betty!
Oh, like I've never heard that before.
But he's got some great comedic timing.
I love the whole sand wall trick. It was beautiful. You bastard.
Actually, some of the best bits come from him and O'Connell themselves, because they make some excellent chemistry as frenemies.
What did you say?
I don't want to tell you. You just hurt me some more.
I think I'll kill you.
Think of my children.
You don't have any children.
Someday I might.
Shut up.
But surprisingly, the best character in the movie for me is Adith Bey, the leader of the Magi Warriors. Holy shit, this guy is awesome! Mostly due to the fact that he's clouded in mystery and very unpredictable. When you first see him, you think he'd be one of the villains of the film. However, halfway through the movie, you discover his true intentions as a guardian of mankind, and he then becomes a total badass.
And you think this justifies the killing of innocent people?
To stop this creature? Let me think.
Yes!
However, there's more to come with him when we get to the second film, because he has some of his best moments in that one. But in this movie, he still kicks ass as much as O'Connell.
You have earned the respect and gratitude of me and my people.
But let's take a look at the main course of the movie, the mummy himself. And goddamn, what an improvement in some areas compared to the original. While Boris Karloff's mummy was more played as a philosopher, this one is more of a wizard of sorts, and much more of a monster until he reaches his human form. When you first see him arise from his tomb, yeah, he's pretty damn scary. But while for most of the movie he is labeled as a horrifying creature, the finale plays him much more as a powerful villain. And boy does he have enough powers to pack a punch, like summoning the plagues of Egypt, the ability to create sandstorms and summon the dead to become his evil minions, and also this scene which really freaked me the hell out.
I hate bugs!
Not to mention this motherfucker has an army of killer beetles. God, to this day those things are terrifying. With their creepy, crawly CGI goodness. While most may consider this overkill and overpowered for a monster like this, I still say for a remake of this nature that it does give more of a challenge for the heroes of the movie.
We are in serious trouble.
Again, this movie is definitely a remake of the original Karloff film, but it does manage to take the original material and use it as balance to create a new and exciting reimagining of the story. Remember, this movie came out in the last hurrah of the 90s, when most films were a little more extreme and had to captivate audiences with enough action spectacles to make them a box office hit. Hell, this movie was going to be released in the summer of 1999, but pushed back to April since Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace was to reign over most of that season.
Hey, O'Connell! It looks to me like I've got all the box office!
Hey, Mole! Looks to me like you're on the wrong side of the critics! So in many respects, with the amount of action and adventure appropriate for that time, the movie delivers a great update of the story, and I say still holds up today. Hell, I still feel we need some good campy Hollywood adventures, and even more so than ever.
especially given the fact that this particular franchise is actually getting some new recognition from old viewers and the next generation, making it one of the best brand names in Universal's library.
Take that, Bembridge scholars!
Before Stephen Summers was brought on board, there were many directors attached to the project, including George Romero of the Dead series and Joe Dante. In fact, Daniel Day-Lewis was the original choice to play the Mummy, and honestly, I think he would have been a good choice. He does kind of have that look of Boris Karloff, and it would have been interesting to see. I mean, hell, he practically knows how to play a Walking Dead type person. Did you see Lincoln?
Really, 150 years and it's still too soon, huh?
Not gonna lie, if they can do Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunters, they could totally do Abraham Lincoln Mummy Raiders.
Speaking of creature design, the visual effects were once again handed over to Lucasfilm's ILM, or Industrial Light and Magic, which, after the release of Jurassic Park in 1993, had a steady but swamped workload for almost every major studio for a vast amount of projects. They were really the first and best CGI effects masters during the 90s, so they pretty much had their hands full, especially with George Lucas on the special edition releases and The Phantom Menace that same year. While the majority of the effects still look pretty good, some of it feels a little more cheap, most notably the first form of Imhotep. I'm not gonna lie, guys, some of the effects kinda look like something out of a Sega Saturn game. In fact, are we sure this isn't just the graphics from the game that was released at the time? I guess it's because of the low budget that the movie's effects had to be lowered in some areas, and again, due to ILM's busy workload on Star Wars, you can see in some areas how they were shrunk for time. And the cheap budget does add to the charm, especially in the fight scenes, where it looks like they shot it in the style of a Power Rangers episode. For the most part, the effects are still pretty good for the time, and overall, can be passable for a film like this. However, the movie does also incorporate practical effects as much as possible. Although some of the suit actors in the mummy costumes do act a little dancey, per se. Not to mention the sets and production designs are also absolutely fantastic.
Can you believe it? Can we just... No.
This is easily and critically Stephen Summers' best movie, especially after a few minor hits such as Disney's first remake of The Jungle Book in live action and the cult classic Deep Rising, which, believe it or not, is actually a prequel to King Kong, according to what a lot of fans have said about the movie. Maybe someday I'll talk about that film. But when this movie came out, it made Stephen Summers a household director, and he ended up directing several other movies, such as the sequel, which we'll talk about next time, Van Helsing, which is a massive Universal Monsters crossover, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I can see why people like it. And of course...
You will call me Commander.
Gee, I know. God.
They jokes? Hell no. They're jokes.
Well, whichever the case, this is still his best movie, and it's easy to see why, because low-budget adventure movies are totally up his alley. The music for the film was composed by the late Jerry Goldsmith. I know it's taken me a while to talk about him fully, since he is a well-respected film composer, whose resume extends to several film scores, including Planet of the Apes, Alien, Legend, First Night, and way too many others to count. But honestly, I've only started to listen to more of his work, and I can totally see why he's well-received by many critics and fans. But for The Mummy, I gotta say, it's a really adventurous and chilling piece of work. It's got some great themes, and even some suspenseful moments of horror, which for a movie about a Universal monster is definitely needed. Like most current soundtracks, it's widely available to the public, and it's honestly worth a listen in of itself. However, I can't deny and realize that the music in some areas does sound similar to Jerry's other work, specifically a film he did a few years prior with the Sean Connery King Arthur epic First Night. Now that doesn't take away from the score necessarily, but it is something to point out. In fact, this was one of Jerry Goldsmith's last scores before he passed away. And I know he had complications with director Stephen Summers, and perhaps he thought this wasn't his best piece of work, but honestly, I think it is. So overall, this movie does have some decent quality and is a fun adventure.
But with its campy attitude, does it have any bugs in the tomb?
Well, for a film of this nature, there are a few minor nitpicks about it. For one thing, some of the character traits are a little, stereotypical. Most notably how a lot of the Middle Eastern people are portrayed. I get the fact that it's set in the 1920s, and in some areas this could be how they were back then, but there were a few jokes that, even today in the annoying PC world we live in, would not fly at all.
What is that god-awful stench?
And I get in some areas how the film was actually banned for most of the countries there. And like I said before, some of the effects could use a touch-up here and there. Now, I'm not asking for a special edition by any means, but its low budget does show the limitations of the special effects in general. But other than that, this movie kicks ass. I know this review is somewhat short, but we got 3 other movies to get through, so it's time to move on.
Time to go.
Overall, The Mummy is a fun, adventurous horror movie from beginning to end. It's got a great cast, a great reimagining of the classic story, impressive action set pieces, and some decent special effects. Like I said, when I reviewed the cancelled 1996 Kong film, this is essentially what it is, and what I wanted. And for that, I freaking love this movie. I actually saw this film along with the sequel and The Scorpion King all in theaters when they came out, and they made for a fun time at the movies with my family. In fact, I even rented this movie back in the day at Blockbuster Video. Yeah, feel old yet, 90s kids? I really wish they would bring those back in some degree. But aside from that, this is a decent remake and a classic adventure and one of Universal's best movies. And for that, I'm gonna give it a good 9 out of 10. So dig it up, open its sarcophagus, and resurrect one of the last great summer blockbusters of the 1990s.
However, we're not quite done yet on the adventures with the O'Connells. Tune in next time when we take a look at the exciting yet kind of rushed sequel with The Mummy Return.
Oh, you so gotta go.
We are in very serious trouble.